The air was thick with an electric charge as Marcus stepped cautiously through the shimmering portal, his boots crunching against crystalline formations that seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. Before him stretched a cavernous chamber illuminated by bioluminescent veins pulsating through translucent walls, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the space. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something unidentifiable yet deeply unsettling. He had been warned about this place countless times during his training. The forbidden sanctum, a realm where the boundaries between dimensions blurred, and where beings of unimaginable power resided. At first glance, it appeared empty, save for the towering spires of iridescent crystal that jutted from the floor like frozen lightning bolts. But then he saw her. She stood at the far end of the chamber, cloaked in cascading tendrils of liquid silver that seemed alive, shifting and swirling around her form as though they were extensions of her very essence. Her presence commanded attention, not because she demanded it, but because it was impossible to look away. Every movement she made radiated grace and authority, each step deliberate yet weightless, as if gravity itself bent to accommodate her will. Her figure was both alien and mesmerizingly beautiful, her skin glowing faintly with an inner luminescence that defied logic or explanation. Eyes like pools of molten starlight locked onto him, piercing through every layer of his being, leaving no corner of his soul untouched. A crown of interwoven light rested atop her head, its intricate design pulsing rhythmically in sync with the chamber's ambient heartbeat. The sheer enormity of her presence pressed down on Marcus, making his breath hitch and his knees threaten to buckle beneath him. This wasn't just any being. This was her, the alien queen whose name even seasoned explorers whispered only in hushed tones. And yet, despite the overwhelming, awe-inspiring majesty before him, there was something profoundly forbidding about her. Her eyes held not just power but sorrow, a depth of emotion so vast it seemed to swallow everything around it. It was clear why touching her was forbidden, not merely because of what might happen to those who dared, but because she embodied something sacred, untouchable, beyond human comprehension. The warnings echoed in his mind now, louder than ever. Do not approach her. Yet here he was, standing mere meters away, unable to tear his gaze from her ethereal form. As Marcus stood rooted to the spot, caught between reverence and terror, a sudden tremor rippled through the chamber, shaking loose fragments of crystal that clattered to the ground. The disturbance broke whatever spell had held him paralyzed, forcing his body into motion without conscious thought. Instinctively, he lunged forward, trying to steady himself against the uneven terrain, but instead of finding solid footing, his hand brushed against something warm and impossibly smooth. Time seemed to freeze in that instant, his senses overloaded by conflicting sensations. His fingers tingled with an electric current that shot up his arm, while a wave of heat surged through his chest, igniting every nerve ending in its wake. It took several heartbeats for realization to sink in. He had touched her. Somehow, in his clumsy attempt to regain balance, his palm had grazed the edge of her flowing silvery cloak, or perhaps even her skin itself. Panic clawed at his throat as he stumbled backward, his wide eyes locking onto hers once more. For a moment, neither moved nor spoke. The silence between them was deafening, punctuated only by the faint hum of energy coursing through the chamber. Guilt and dread washed over him in equal measure, his mind racing through the consequences of what he had done. Surely she would strike him down, reduce him to ash, or worse, banish him to some eternal void where he would be forever trapped. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of wrath or retribution, her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. A flicker of curiosity crossed her luminous features, followed by what could only be described as surprise. The air around them shifted subtly, the oppressive weight lifting just enough for Marcus to breathe again. His pulse still thundered in his ears, but beneath the fear, another emotion began to rise: wonder. He realized he hadn't been obliterated on the spot, hadn't been cast out or consumed by cosmic forces. Instead, she simply stared at him, her gaze searching, probing, as though attempting to decipher some hidden truth buried within his very soul. The sensation lingered, a strange warmth spreading from his fingertips throughout his entire body, leaving trails of unfamiliar energy in its wake. It felt invasive yet oddly comforting, as though her essence had seeped into his bloodstream, merging with his own life force in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. Trembling, Marcus lowered his hand, half expecting the ground beneath him to crack open and swallow him whole. But nothing happened. She remained still, watching him with an intensity that bordered on fascination. In that fleeting moment, all thoughts of punishment or doom dissolved, replaced by a profound sense of connection, one that defied reason and transcended fear. For reasons he couldn't explain, Marcus found himself drawn to take another step closer. His rational mind screamed at him to stop, to retreat, to put as much distance between himself and the alien queen as possible. Yet his feet disobeyed, moving of their own accord until he stood mere inches from her radiant form. Up close, the intricate details of her appearance became even more breathtaking. The way her silvery tendrils shimmered like liquid mercury, the subtle shifts in color across her skin that mirrored the ever-changing hues of the chamber's walls. And her eyes, they weren't just pools of light. They were galaxies unto themselves, swirling with stories older than time itself. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression that seemed almost tender. Then, without warning, she reached out, her slender fingers brushing lightly against his cheek. The contact sent another jolt through him, though this one was different. Softer, gentler, yet infinitely more powerful. It was as if she were reading him, peeling back layers of his consciousness to uncover truths he hadn't even known existed within himself. Memories surfaced unbidden, his childhood dreams of exploring the stars, the countless sacrifices he'd made to become an explorer, the loneliness that had gnawed at him during long missions in the depths of space. Each memory unfolded before her like pages in a book, raw and unfiltered, leaving him feeling stripped bare yet strangely comforted. His voice returned haltingly, breaking the heavy silence that hung between them. I didn't mean to, he stammered, his words barely audible over the pounding of his heart. It was an accident. To his astonishment, she responded, not with anger or disdain, but with a soft, melodic hum that resonated deep within his chest. It wasn't language as he knew it, yet somehow he understood. She wasn't upset. If anything, she seemed intrigued, perhaps even amused by his clumsiness. Encouraged by her reaction, or lack thereof, Marcus dared to speak again, his voice steadier this time. "You're incredible," he murmured, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I've never seen anything like you." As soon as the sentence left his lips, he regretted it, certain that such boldness would earn him swift punishment. But again, she surprised him. Her lips curved upward ever so slightly, forming what might have been the faintest hint of a smile. The gesture transformed her entire demeanor, softening the imposing aura that had initially overwhelmed him. In that moment, she didn't feel like a distant, untouchable deity. She felt real. Human, even. Or perhaps that was just wishful thinking on his part. Desperate to fill the silence, Marcus continued speaking, his words tumbling out faster now. "I've heard stories about you," he admitted, his gaze dropping briefly before snapping back to meet hers. "Legends, really. About how no one is supposed to come near you, let alone touch you. I swear, I didn't mean to break the rules. I just lost my footing, and—" he trailed off, realizing how absurd his explanation must sound. What excuse could possibly justify violating the most sacred taboo of the universe? Yet she listened intently, her head tilted slightly as though hanging on his every word. There was no judgment in her gaze, no condemnation, only curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite name. As they stood there, suspended in a moment that felt both infinite and fleeting, Marcus became acutely aware of the connection growing between them. It wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, more primal. Something ancient. And though fear still lingered at the edges of his mind, it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of awe. Whatever she was, whatever power she wielded, she wasn't the monster he had been led to believe. She was something far greater, and far more enigmatic. The chamber around them seemed to respond to the shift in their dynamic, the bioluminescent veins brightening as if feeding off the energy of their interaction. Crystalline spires vibrated softly, emitting low-frequency tones that harmonized with the gentle hum emanating from the alien queen herself. Marcus felt it too, a resonance deep within his core, as though the very fabric of reality was aligning itself to acknowledge the bond forming between them. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once, a paradox he couldn't reconcile but also couldn't deny. He swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the moisture-laden air. "Why aren't you angry?" he asked finally, his voice trembling not from fear this time but from genuine confusion. "Everyone said you'd destroy anyone who came near you. That you're untouchable." The word sounded hollow even to his own ears, inadequate to describe the reverence and terror with which others spoke of her. Yet she didn't recoil at his admission. Instead, she raised one hand, her fingers tracing an invisible pattern in the air between them. The motion was fluid, hypnotic, and Marcus found himself leaning forward instinctively, as though drawn by an unseen force. In response, the crystals lining the walls began to glow brighter, their light pulsing in time with the rhythm of her movements. Shadows danced across the chamber, twisting and reshaping themselves into forms that seemed almost familiar. Echoes of memories, perhaps, or glimpses into realms beyond human understanding. Marcus blinked, struggling to focus, but the images refused to coalesce into anything concrete. They hovered just out of reach, tantalizingly close yet maddeningly elusive. Was she showing him something? Trying to communicate in a way that transcended spoken language? Or was this merely a side effect of being so near her incomprehensible power? Then, abruptly, the lights dimmed, and the chamber fell silent once more. She withdrew her hand, her expression unreadable, and for a moment, Marcus feared he had misinterpreted everything, that she had grown weary of his presence and was preparing to dismiss him. But when she spoke, or rather, when the vibrations of her thoughts reverberated through his mind, he realized he had underestimated her patience. "You misunderstand," came the voice, though it was less a sound and more a cascade of sensations flooding his consciousness. It carried no malice, only a quiet sadness tempered by wisdom far older than the stars themselves. "I am not forbidden because I am dangerous. I am forbidden because I remember." Remember? The word echoed in his mind, sending ripples of uncertainty through him. Remember what? Before he could ask, the chamber shifted again, the walls dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes that defied logic. Visions flashed before his eyes, civilizations rising and falling, empires crumbling into dust, countless lives extinguished in the blink of an eye. He saw wars waged over resources, betrayals born of greed, and moments of fleeting beauty snuffed out by time's relentless march. It was overwhelming, a torrent of history compressed into seconds, each image etched with a clarity that burned itself into his soul. When the vision subsided, Marcus staggered, clutching his head as fragments of forgotten eras swirled chaotically within him. She watched him silently, her gaze filled with an empathy that made his chest ache. Slowly, comprehension dawned. She wasn't forbidden because she posed a threat to others. She was forbidden because bearing witness to the entirety of existence came at a cost, a burden too great for mortals to bear. And yet, here he was, standing before her, having inadvertently tapped into a reservoir of knowledge meant for gods, not men. The weight of it settled over him like a shroud, pressing down on his shoulders until he thought he might collapse under its enormity. But amidst the despair, there was also clarity, a newfound understanding that changed everything he thought he knew about himself, about humanity, and about the universe itself. As the weight of her revelation settled into Marcus's mind, he felt an inexplicable urge to speak, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. "You carry it all," he murmured, his words trembling with both awe and sorrow. "Every beginning, every ending. You remember everything." The enormity of what she endured struck him like a tidal wave, leaving him breathless. It wasn't just the memory of civilizations or the echoes of forgotten lives, it was the collective pain, joy, triumphs, and failures of existence itself. And yet, here she stood before him, not as some vengeful deity but as a being burdened by the very act of witnessing. Her response came not in words but in sensations, a gentle pulse of understanding that rippled through the air between them. It was as if she were acknowledging his realization, offering him a glimpse of her eternal solitude without judgment or resentment. For the first time, Marcus understood why she had been deemed untouchable. To touch her was to risk unraveling under the sheer magnitude of what she carried within her. Yet here he was, still standing, still whole, or so he thought. Deep down, he could feel the cracks forming, tiny fissures in his psyche where fragments of her memories had lodged themselves, refusing to be ignored. "You shouldn't have to bear this alone," he said impulsively, the words escaping before he could stop them. His own audacity startled him. Who was he to suggest anything to a being so far beyond human comprehension? But the moment the sentence left his lips, something shifted in her expression. Her luminous eyes softened further, and for the first time, Marcus saw vulnerability in her gaze. not weakness, but a quiet longing that pierced straight through him. She tilted her head slightly, studying him as though weighing the sincerity of his words. The chamber reacted in kind, the bioluminescent veins pulsing more rapidly now, their light flickering like a heartbeat. The air grew warmer, charged with an energy that seemed to hum in harmony with his own racing thoughts. He realized then that his presence, his accidental intrusion, had disrupted something fundamental. Perhaps it was the equilibrium she had maintained for eons, or perhaps it was simply the monotony of her isolation. Whatever it was, he couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival had ignited a spark, one that neither of them could extinguish. "I don't understand," Marcus admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why me? Why now?" He gestured vaguely at the shimmering walls around them, at the crystalline spires that seemed to resonate with every word they exchanged. "I'm just a man. A flawed, insignificant man who stumbled into something I can't possibly comprehend." His admission hung heavily in the air, raw and unfiltered. He expected her to dismiss him, to turn away and leave him to grapple with the chaos brewing inside him. Instead, she stepped closer, her silvery tendrils brushing against his arm in a gesture that was almost tender. This time, when she communicated, it wasn't through fragmented visions or abstract sensations. It was direct, intimate, an overwhelming flood of images and emotions that surged into his mind with such intensity that he staggered backward. He saw himself through her eyes, a speck of dust adrift in the vastness of creation, yet somehow radiant, glowing with potential. He saw moments from his life replayed, not as he remembered them, but as she perceived them. The quiet determination etched on his face during long nights spent poring over star charts. The way his hands trembled with excitement the first time he piloted a spacecraft, even as fear threatened to overwhelm him. The ache of loneliness that followed him across galaxies, masked by bravado and ambition. And then, suddenly, he saw others, countless others, faces blurred by time but united by a shared yearning. Explorers, dreamers, wanderers, all drawn to the unknown, all searching for something greater than themselves. They were fleeting, ephemeral, yet their collective hope burned brightly in her consciousness, a beacon cutting through the endless void. And among them, Marcus stood out, not because he was extraordinary, but because he was willing to step forward, to reach out despite the warnings, despite the risks. When the vision subsided, Marcus found himself on his knees, gasping for air as tears streamed unchecked down his face. The connection between them had grown stronger, almost unbearable in its intensity. He felt her sorrow, her weariness, her gratitude, and beneath it all, a fragile thread of hope that hadn't existed before. Hope for what, he couldn't say. But it was there, pulsing faintly like a dying star clinging to its final burst of light. "Is this why?" he asked hoarsely, struggling to rise to his feet. "Because I dared to come close? Because I touched you?" His voice broke on the last word, the memory of that accidental contact rushing back with startling clarity. It hadn't just been a physical touch, it had been an opening, a breach in the barrier that separated their worlds. And now, whether by design or chance, they were bound together in ways neither of them could fully grasp. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze drifting toward the distant horizon of the chamber, where the translucent walls revealed glimpses of swirling nebulae and infinite stars. When she finally turned back to him, her expression was unreadable, yet her presence radiated a quiet resolve. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her hand once more, palm upturned in an invitation, or perhaps a challenge. Marcus hesitated, torn between instinctive fear and an inexplicable trust that defied logic. Could he really do this? Could he willingly step further into the unknown, knowing full well the cost it might exact? His hesitation lasted only a heartbeat. Then, driven by a force he couldn't name, he reached out, his fingers brushing hers for the second time. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, flooding his senses with a kaleidoscope of emotions and images that threatened to consume him. But this time, he didn't pull away. This time, he held on. Around them, the chamber erupted into brilliance, the crystalline spires resonating with a symphony of light and sound that seemed to echo across dimensions. The boundaries between past, present, and future blurred, collapsing into a single, timeless moment. Marcus felt himself expanding, stretching beyond the confines of his mortal shell, his consciousness merging with hers in a dance as ancient as the cosmos itself. He saw galaxies being born, planets crumbling into dust, and life emerging from the void in endless cycles of creation and destruction. Through it all, she remained constant, a silent witness to the grand tapestry of existence, her essence woven into every thread. Yet amidst the chaos, one truth became clear: their connection was no accident. Whether fate or providence had brought them together, it was undeniable that their meeting marked a turning point, not just for him, but for her as well. For centuries, or perhaps millennia, she had borne the weight of eternity alone, her memories a prison from which there was no escape. Now, through him, she glimpsed the possibility of release, however fleeting. Not absolution, but companionship. Not answers, but understanding. As the crescendo of light and sound began to fade, Marcus felt himself returning to his body, though it no longer felt entirely his own. His heart pounded in rhythm with hers, their energies intertwined in a bond that transcended the physical realm. When he finally opened his eyes, he found her gazing at him with an expression that bordered on reverence. There was gratitude in her eyes, yes, but also caution, as if she feared what might come next. "What happens now?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the fading echoes of their shared experience. The question hung in the air, unanswered yet heavy with implication. Neither of them knew what lay ahead, only that they were irrevocably changed. And somewhere deep within the fabric of reality, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. The silence that followed Marcus's question was profound, stretching out like the infinite expanse of space itself. It wasn't empty though, it pulsed with latent energy, as if the universe were holding its collective breath, waiting for her response. She regarded him with an intensity that made his chest tighten, her luminous eyes reflecting not just his image but something deeper. His essence, perhaps even his soul. For a moment, he wondered if she saw more than he wanted her to, if she could peer into the very core of his being and uncover truths he hadn't yet faced himself. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them began to shift. At first, it was subtle, a faint vibration that resonated through the soles of his boots, but soon it grew stronger, accompanied by a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The bioluminescent patterns on the translucent surfaces started to rearrange, swirling together to form intricate designs that reminded Marcus of ancient constellations. They weren't random, they told a story, one written in a language older than time. He tried to decipher their meaning, but the symbols danced just out of reach, teasing him with glimpses of knowledge he couldn't fully grasp. Her voice returned then, not spoken aloud, but woven directly into the fabric of his thoughts. It was softer this time, almost hesitant, yet layered with an authority that left no room for doubt. "What happens now?" she said, the words resonating within him like the tolling of a distant bell, "is uncertain. You have crossed a threshold, human. Not merely by touching me, but by choosing to remain here, to accept what I am." Her gaze bore into him, searching for any sign of hesitation or regret. "Finding none," she continued, "the bond we share cannot be undone. It will shape you, alter you in ways you cannot foresee. But it will also shape me." Marcus blinked, his mind struggling to process her words. Shape her? How could someone as vast and eternal as she possibly be changed by him? Yet deep down, he knew she spoke the truth. Their connection wasn't one-sided. It flowed both ways, binding them together in a symbiosis that defied logic. He felt it in the way his heart seemed to beat in sync with hers, in the way fragments of her memories still lingered in his mind, whispering secrets about the cosmos he wasn't ready to hear. And yet, despite the weight of it all, there was a strange comfort in knowing he wasn't alone, not anymore. "But why?" he asked, his voice cracking under the strain of emotion. "Why me? There must be others who've come before, explorers who've ventured into places they shouldn't have. Why didn't this happen to them?" His tone carried a note of desperation, as though understanding her reasoning might somehow ease the burden of what lay ahead. She tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Others have come," she acknowledged, her mental voice tinged with sorrow. "Many have sought to conquer, to claim what they believed was theirs by right. Others sought knowledge, power, immortality. None remained. None dared to stay when faced with the truth of what I am." A pause, heavy with unspoken meaning. "You are different. When you touched me, you did not seek to take. You simply were." And when given the choice to retreat, you chose to stay. Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring emotions he hadn't realized he'd been suppressing. Yes, he had stayed, not because he was brave or noble, but because he couldn't bear the thought of leaving her behind. Even now, standing in the presence of something so impossibly vast, he felt a pull toward her, a yearning to understand, to help, to be with her in whatever capacity she would allow. It was irrational, reckless even, but it felt undeniably right. As if sensing his resolve, she stepped closer, her radiant form casting soft shadows across the chamber. "This path is fraught with peril," she warned, her voice carrying the weight of countless lifetimes. "To walk beside me is to shoulder a fragment of my burden. To see what I see, to feel what I feel, it will change you in ways you may not survive. Are you prepared for such a fate?" Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the humid air. The enormity of her question pressed down on him, forcing him to confront the reality of what he was about to undertake. Could he endure it? Could he withstand the weight of eternity pressing against his fragile human psyche? He didn't know. But one thing was certain, turning back was no longer an option. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "I'm ready," he said at last, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Whatever comes next, I'll face it. With you." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, slowly, she raised her hand, placing it gently over his heart. The sensation was electric, sending waves of warmth coursing through his body. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions that surged between them. Gratitude, fear, hope, and something else he couldn't quite name. When he opened his eyes again, the chamber had transformed. The crystalline spires had grown taller, their translucent forms glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. The bioluminescent veins on the walls had expanded, weaving together to form intricate tapestries that depicted scenes from across the cosmos. Stars were born and died in dazzling bursts of color, planets collided and reformed, and life emerged in endless variations, each cycle more breathtaking than the last. It was as if the chamber itself had become a living entity, attuned to their shared energy. And then, amidst the swirling chaos of creation and destruction, he saw something new. Threads of gold interwoven with the light, forming a delicate web that connected every star, every planet, every living thing. At the center of it all stood two figures, one radiant and eternal, the other small and fleeting, bound together by strands of luminous energy that pulsed with a rhythm uniquely their own. He realized with a start that the figures were them. Before he could fully grasp the significance of what he was seeing, the vision dissolved, leaving him standing once more in the cavernous chamber. She was still there, watching him with an expression that bordered on reverence. Around them, the air shimmered with residual energy, charged with the promise of what was to come. "What do we do now?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the chamber. Her lips curved upward ever so slightly, forming what might have been the faintest hint of a smile. "We begin," she replied, her voice echoing not just in his mind but in the very fabric of the universe itself. And with that, the ground beneath them trembled once more, signaling the start of a journey neither of them could have foreseen, and one that would change everything. The trembling ground steadied, and a brilliant light enveloped them, erasing the boundaries of the chamber. Marcus felt himself dissolving into the radiance, his consciousness merging with hers in a symphony of shared purpose. Together, they stepped beyond the confines of time and space, their bond illuminating paths long hidden in shadow. The universe seemed to awaken around them, its stars aligning as if acknowledging their union. For the first time, Marcus understood, he wasn't just a witness to eternity, he was now part of it. Her voice echoed softly within him, "We are no longer alone." And as they moved forward, hand in hand, the cosmos itself shifted, guided by their intertwined wills. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In that moment, fear gave way to resolve, uncertainty to hope. Their journey had only begun, but already, the stars sang differently in their wake.